Welcome to Peace, Love, and Pollinators, the podcast that's anything but your typical gardening show. We're here to transform how you see your backyard, balcony, or local park by uncovering the powerful connections between you, your plants, and the planet. From pollinator-friendly gardening hacks to creating green spaces that fight climate change, we explore more than just what to plant. We dig into why it matters. You're listening to Peace, Love, and Pollinators. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Peace, Love, and Pollinators. I am your host, Trevor Smith, and I am so excited again for today's episode because we just have banging back-to-back episodes. Kristen Nicholson is our guest today of Blue Stem Natives. Kristen Nicholson and Britt Drews are the co-founder of Blue Stem Natives, a woman-owned native-only nursery based in Norwell, Massachusetts. Since launching in 2021, they have been helping gardeners, land stewards across New England to access high-quality native plants while promoting wildlife-friendly landscapes, straight species selections, and sustainable growing practices. Their work is rooted in a simple but powerful mission, making native plants easier to learn about, easier to buy, and easier to use in everyday landscapes. Why am I excited about this? Because I have been a backer of this wonderful company since the GoFundMe days, and I have been trying to get them on for quite a while. They are very busy women, and finally I got Kristen to sit down with us. Welcome, Kristen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trevor. Yeah, sorry about that.
No, this is all good. So let's just jump right into this because I find what you've done fascinating for a number of different reasons. But the biggest one is it takes a lot when you just kind of have this idea. And I'd love to kind of hear about the conception between you and Britt. But when you have this idea, it takes a lot. Everybody has ideas. Everybody has dreams. But to actually jump into it, to actually make it happen, to follow through and to take that risk. When people talk to me kind of like about what I do, I say, look, being an entrepreneur is kind of like cliff jumping. You basically just need to make sure you clear the rocks and you figure your dive out on the way down, whether you want a swan, cannonball, whatever it is, but all you have to do is make sure you clear the rocks. So just before we jump all the way into this, can you just tell me a little bit about kind of the start of Blue Stem?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started first and foremost, we met each other through Wild Ones, starting Wild Ones. So that's for people who may or may not know, Wild Ones is a national native plant landscape organization, and there weren't any chapters in Massachusetts. So Britt wanted to start one. She's from the Midwest, and they have lots of them out there, but none here. And she had put a call out on a Facebook gardening group that she needed some board members to help get this plant group started. I actually knew very, very little about native plants at the time. I had gone back to school. My kids are grown, and I was trying to figure out the next part of my life. And it was one of those kind of say yes years where I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll help out a new group. And it just turned into like light switch, lifelong passion type of situation. Absolutely loved the people that I met, loved everything about learning native plants and insects and wildlife. And so, like, really long story short, we were working on doing a plant sale or a fundraiser for the Wild Ones chapter. And this was in the middle of like the pandemic situation. So we're in Britt's backyard, like 20 feet apart from everybody else. And we were talking about how it was so difficult as a little group with some money to be able to order and source straight species native plants. And that was as an organization. So you're spending a couple $1,000s. You should be able to, find them pretty easily. And it was challenging. And we were talking about how if it was that hard as an organization with money, it's impossible for homeowners. So we kind of like locked eyes across the yard and we're like, that's interesting. And we're like, I wonder if we could fix that. It literally started just like that. It was like, see a problem, fix it. And I don't know if you've ever met any stubborn women in your life, but we are two stubborn women. So we don't let anything
I would
get in
go
the
with
way, really.
determined over stubborn.
Yeah. We don't let anything get in the way. We
That
just
is, and
charge ahead.
that's just that's the perfect story, and that's where all great things, are born. What I'm loving about this episode is a number of things. It's the entrepreneurial aspect, it's the woman-owned business aspect, because it's just,
Mhm.
as I say to people, when I'm teaching, vote with your dollars, and if you can support, small businesses, small and local, if you can support minority-owned and women-owned businesses, it's what you should do if that's what you believe in, and I think it's important. Just kind of, you kind of already answered the question a little bit, but what was the gap? And you said it was kind of the availability of native plants, but that's pretty much what made you say blue stem right now, was just realizing that there's a huge gap in the native plant kind of availability market to homeowners and landscapers alike. And that was kind of the antithesis. So from there, what I found interesting and what I really respect is that you're committed so much to straight species
Yeah.
rather than nativars and cultivars. Now, why does this distinction matter? And what do you wish more people understood kind of about this commitment? Because natives is like becoming a thing. Native
Hmm.
plants are, everywhere. And I have a whole section in one of my presentations with the distinctions of, straight species, nativars, native selects, et cetera. So why the commitment to straight species?
Yeah. I mean, exactly what you say. You can find native cultivars pretty much everywhere. It's usually that like corner of the garden centers where like, oh, here's the native plants. So you can find some, and it's usually like the purple echinacea and the the general well known plants, some cardinal flower, whatever. But we decided to go pretty hard on the straight species, mostly because it's not something easily found, and we were told so much that it was not going to be a viable business decision. It was a terrible business decision. You can't make any money selling straight species plants, and that's not true. But basically, we found a massive hole in the market, and we decided to fill it. We are pretty much. I feel pretty confident in saying we have the largest selection of straight species native plants, at least on the southeast Massachusetts, if
Yep.
not most of Massachusetts. And it was easy for us to kind of lean into that. We find it more beneficial to have straight species plants, environmentally speaking. We want that genetic diversity. It's so important. Um, as far as the business side of things, could we make more money selling cultivars? Yeah. Does that in horticulture world? That's where the money is made, is through cultivation. So trademarks and cultivation, but that's not why we started all of this. So yeah, we just decided to lean in and go full in.
I mean,
And
that's
we
awesome
don't
because
want
you
to
set yourself kind of
disparage
at a
cultivars.
disadvantage. But I know blue
Yeah,
stem is
yeah.
like at least in my world, in my community, like you're on the lips of many people because we can't find, as native plant designers, we can't find those straight species. We can't find all that. So it's just the fact that you kind of took the hard road and stuck to it is totally admirable. It's just I
That's
think
what
it's
we
awesome.
do.
I just think it's awesome. And people say, "Have you heard? Have you heard?" Yeah, I'm like, yeah, yeah. It's absolutely awesome. The other piece, though, you emphasize is using ecotypic seed whenever possible. And this is another big thing because when I teach, especially like homeowners and even, new landscapers about ecotypes, they're like, well, this is the only thing I need. Now it's still hard to find ecotypic seed only, but
Mhm.
you're emphasizing that. So can you explain, I guess, really what ecotypic seed is, or what
Mhm.
ecotypes are, and why they matter as far as resilience, habitat value, and kind of like long-term ecological success?
Sure. Well, so, you start with eco regions, and that's different from grow regions. So it's not talking about hardiness so much. It's talking about oh, my dog in the background. It's talking about what has grown here alongside wildlife for millennia, right?
Hmm.
It has this essential value. These plants are so well adjusted to our climate right here. It could be, as close down to a county. And these plants have been here. They've survived all kinds of, catastrophic events. It can handle the hydrology, the geology, the wildlife. Um, it is insanely difficult to find ecotypic seed, and we're trying to work really hard to expand that. We do have a seed farm that we're trying to expand so that we can provide, again, see a hole, fix it, fill that need.
Yep.
And so we just believe that they grow healthier plants, more resilient gardens. We're trying to help the wildlife that is here now. We try not to get in the weeds, so to speak, about, well, with climate change, things migrating north, we should plant things from the south. Yeah, no,
Yep.
we're all set with that. We just do what needs to be done right now.
Yep, totally. And that's one of the things. I mean, like when the new hardiness zone map came out, one of the things that I spoke about was everybody got excited. Like the designers I worked with all got excited. They're like, "Oh, new plant palette! This is awesome!" And I was just like, "Hold on," because if we get so excited that we start using this new plant palette, who's going to starve on the other end, when
Yeah.
things come out of balance? I'm not against helping plants migrate north because climate's changing faster than plants can move. However, I totally agree with, and again, respect just you doubling down on, all right, we're going to go with, with this eco region and everything else.
Mhm.
So you said you're starting farmers plots or what's happening
We
with?
do. We have a seed farm on conservation land in Norwell, and we've had that for a few years now. We've been expanding it slowly because we're really particular about the seeds that we put in there. We get, some wild collection from a few areas that we've been given permission from conservation commissions to collect from. Some private landowners have given us permission to collect on their land. So we're keeping really close eye on the provenance of things. And just like that seed farm it's as local as it gets.
Yep.
And we're really excited about it.
I mean, it's what we need, and it's what the market needs. One of the
Mhm.
other decisions that you made, again, totally respect, it is your commitment to peat-free growing,
Mhm.
because so many of the mixes, so many of the cheap mixes, and
Mhm.
everything else all contain peat. So again, like you set your mission, and you're really living by it. But what made you make that decision? And kind of how does that play into just all the values that you've been talking about?
Yeah. So, our everything starts with our concern for these ecosystems, and wetlands are one of the most important ecosystems that are around.
Hmm.
And even though, we're not collecting peat from wetlands in this area, they're coming from somewhere. Most of it's from Canada.
Yeah.
And mining for peat is massively degrading to wetland systems, to the peat bogs. And I know it's definitely gotten better over the years. I'm not saying that it's, awfully evil and it hasn't improved. It has, but it takes thousands of years to create like an inch of peat, and we strip it and mine it, you know, outrageously. So it's just another one of those things that it was what we wanted in our own yard. It's what we wanted for our own growing practices. So we figured if we want it, then other people probably want it, and we can't find it anywhere else. So why not provide it?
Yep.
And that's really been the basis of every decision we make. If that's what we want, then other people probably want the same thing.
Totally. It's just another one of those things, like opting out of nativars, opting out of
Mhm.
peat. Like you're you s- from a business perspective, you're
Terrible business decisions.
stacking the deck against yourself. But
It's true.
but it's one of the things that I think is great, because you're like, it's not going to be easy. We're making this harder for ourselves, but we're just going to double down and make this happen, which leads me to my next one that I totally respect. You, as a practice, avoid synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, and in a nursery setting, when you're growing plants for people, aesthetics are everything. Your crop is everything. So, how do you stay true to that philosophy? Like, how do you stay, because again, it's just one more thing that you're putting against yourself, but it falls in line with the mission that you stated in the beginning. So, how do you justify, where did that come from? Because your entire business is based on healthy plants, is based on healthy crops. So what made you go fertilizer and pesticide free?
Yeah. So, right back, same answer. It's what we wanted in our own yards. We mitigated a little bit. We sell our plants on the smaller side. We try to, most of, like, the great majority of our plants are in quarts, some gallons, and woody things are in gallons. But for the most part, we sell small. And it's a lot easier to keep plants healthy when we're not pushing them to be giant full pots too fast. A lot of it comes down to educating on the scene. I talk myself hoarse most days to people because, they'll see this tiny little plant and I'll be like, okay, but put it in the ground. And I swear it's going to be massive really fast. So it does. We've built trust with our customers. Our customers trust us. And if they have problems, they come and talk to us and we figure out a solution. It could be maybe it wasn't planted in quite the right conditions. And so they had some trouble with it. And, a lot of times I'll tell people, there are aphids on that plant. But if you give it a couple of days, I bet you'll see some ladybugs and some birds come and clean them up for you. So just giving people really simple education and options helps a ton. And some of it has just mean you take a few steps back and all of a sudden you don't see those anymore.
You don't see the nibble marks or anything else.
You don't see it. Yeah. And then if you see, holes, and we love holes in leaves, we get excited. So that's, I think when people, it's contagious when people see how excited I get because I see a new caterpillar eating a leaf. They're like, oh, okay. And so they want that plant now.
Yes, it's working.
Yay! Yay!
Totally. That's awesome. And you said a couple times in that response, education is everything. Like we have this huge paradigm shift that has to happen with how people shop plants, how people view lawns, just how people view trees, like all of it. I mean, I can jump into any single one of those topics, but it really is, just educating people that, yes, you are purchasing this plant. Yes, it's an investment, but it is supposed to be a part of an ecosystem. It is supposed to be nibbled. If nothing's eating your garden, something is wrong. So
correct. Absolutely.
So a lot of people I've found, and I'm sure you have too, really want to do the right thing ecologically, but they all feel overwhelmed. So what are the biggest mistakes beginners make with native plants, and where should they start instead?
I think the biggest newbie mistake is going hard in. And I get it. We get excited and we want to make all the changes right now. And it gets overwhelming and out of control very quickly. And then, you're getting all these plants. You're very excited about it. You want to see all the birds and the butterflies and everything else hitting your yard. But then you get everything planted and it's just not, it just sits there for a couple of years while everything establishes. So I really recommend people start small. I like to use pallets as a good kind of almost like training wheels. Like start with a couple pallet sizes. Do a couple like 4x4 or 6x6 plot and fill that plot to the brim. Like just fill it up. and let things grow for a couple of years and poke around it and see how you like it. So I really encourage starting small and not going hardcore. And I also tell people to not get too wrapped up in being perfect. We all have plants that we have connections with. I love dahlias. Man, you can pry dahlias out of my hands when I'm dead because I love them.
Yep.
There's no reason why you can't have dahlias in your yard. And there's plenty of plants that we can have in our yard and not feel bad about it. And I tell people, they're like, oh, my garden's full. I'm like, the heck it is. There's always room for more plants.
Can you see mulch? It's not full.
Yeah, there's no such thing as full. So you can always add more. And it's one of those things, like, start small, learn the plants as you go, and then, not get too in your head about it.
And I totally agree with you. That's definitely, I would have to agree with a little extra. I feel like people approach native plants like they approach like a new diet or something. Like they throw out they throw out hundreds of dollars of groceries because they're starting a new diet and they can't have anything, and then they make themselves miserable because they really want, I don't know what that is, just like you said, dahlias, they might really want, and they totally deny themselves, and it's like, and then the plant shaming, like there shouldn't be any guilt. I've said on here before, I say to people all the time, like, the biggest win for me is to get you out in your garden and appreciate. I don't care if you have one native plant on your property. Get into your garden and interact with nature. After that, we can change your plant palette and we can get you to appreciate natives. But I feel like the hardest lift for us is to get people outside and connecting with nature again. But like you said, it's just like, don't throw everything out. And I've known plenty of people who do that. They tear everything out that's non-native and start from scratch. I'm like, that's a heavy lift. It's an expensive lift, and it's a lot of work. You just created a lot of maintenance for yourself, where if you go a little bit at a time, you'll get to know it. The other piece is I find people jump all in on natives and they just buy up natives without actually even looking at their property. So like they could have a totally, dry property and they're pulling in all these like moist loving natives,
wetland
or vice
plants.
versa, but just because it says native, they're getting it, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's for your site. So that is like the other kind of newbie mistake I find people make. They just get so excited because the tag says native, or because they were at Blue Stem and they're just like, oh, I'm buying everything.
They're excited. Yeah. I cringe at, a lot of the online conversations. People, they mean well and they get really excited about things and passionate, and I get it. But I just, when you go hard and you take that black and white, like that hard line, and you start shaming people or saying that you're wrong, and it's like, no. Now you've just pushed them away, and we've lost that opportunity to grab more people. So my philosophy is to meet people where they are. I know what they enjoy, how they enjoy using their yard, what they want for their future, and work it into that, because I don't feel like, we still need to be able to enjoy our spaces, and we need to be able to use our spaces. So it's kind of like the lawn situation. Everyone's like, no, I want no turf grass. I go, okay, but do you have kids and a dog?
Yeah.
Then that's not realistic.
Right.
Because they're like, what native plants can I put in instead of lawn? I'm like, none. Like, there's no native plant that can stand up to a dog running around and crazy, like,
or
it's
an
just not real
impromptu
feasible.
football game, soccer, whatever it is. I mean, turf grass has its place.
It has its place.
And I tell people it's a great gathering spot. It's a great playing spot.
Yeah.
It's also a great way for you to interact with your garden without actually, standing.
We just have way too much of it.
Yes.
It's just too much.
Exactly. There's just too much going on.
Too much.
So I'm just going to just change like a little bit, because just as far as Blue Stem's concerned, you serve like everybody. You have homeowners, you have landscapers, you have municipalities, you have designers.
That's really exciting.
So like, how do these audiences differ, from, what they need and where do you see the biggest opportunity for change is? Because that's a broad audience, like passionate
Mhm.
homeowners, okay, passionate designers like myself, okay. Now municipalities, which is very cool, are have found you and are starting to get interested, but they're all very
Mhm.
different audiences. So
Yeah.
like how are they different? And where are the biggest opportunities for change there?
Yeah. So we started with our main focus has always been homeowners. It's always been retail homeowners because they were the ones in most need. Just like as an organization, municipalities and landscapers could always order large quantities from the wholesalers, and they still can. So they're not our primary focus. It 100% homeowners and retail customers. Um, and that's really why we focus on smaller plants too. Uh, and again, goes back to that education because people want to come in and buy the already in bloom, and we're like, no, no, buy more of the small plants, and you can have a bigger bang for your buck.
Yep.
So we have a pretty small footprint. Like if you look at our website, it looks like we're a huge operation, and we're not. We have like less than a quarter of an acre that we're on, and we have a massive greenhouse on like a third of that. So we grow really intensively. So we have to focus our growing on the plants that are best suited for smaller landscapes. We grow in quantities that most municipalities and landscapers are wanting hundreds of
Hmm.
plants, hundreds of each species, and we just can't do that. So we focus more on the plants that they can't easily get wholesalers. So
Yep.
if we're seeing, pinelands is growing this, this, and this, but they're not growing this, then we know that there's a hole there.
Yep.
So we're like, okay, we'll grow that. And a lot of it is, those wholesale nurseries are like, well, maybe that's not profitable. Like, okay, but the landscapers are looking for it. So is it not profitable, or is
Hmm.
it just not something that you're used to growing?
Right.
So I guess we've been really good at finding holes in the market and filling them. Hmm. I think our biggest thing now is expanding our reach without expanding our footprint is the biggest challenge that we're facing right now. We get a lot of calls for like, do you deliver?
Yep.
And can you come to our garden club and sell plants and all those things? So we are working on that.
It's
Yeah.
tough to be successful. And there you go. Like, how did you stack the deck against yourself, but
We do.
then by
We're
you
really good
doubled
at
down on
that.
that and you did an amazing job. And
Yeah.
as you said, you found all the holes. The two of you really have this knack for finding holes in the market because it's absolutely true. And looking at your availability list and your grow lists, it's all the things that you're not going to find, anywhere
Mhm.
else. Now, of course, as a designer, I would love to put in my order for thousands of plugs and
Mhm.
cords with you. However, I get it.
Mhm.
So I, focus on the ones, that I can't find elsewhere. And to me, that's awesome because that, when I have when I'm doing a design, there's the aesthetic part of it, but there's also the ecological niche that I'm trying to fill.
Mhm.
And I find holes in that niche. So like it's just great, to be able to fill those holes and not have to kind of put up a Swiss cheese landscape, that
Mhm.
looks great, but it doesn't necessarily fill all the gaps that I'm looking to fill. So I
Right.
think it's
And
awesome.
eventually, would we love to do both really well? Absolutely. But wholesale and retail are two very different businesses. And
Different
so
animals. Yep.
huge, huge differences. So it's like, we provide for landscapers and municipalities? Yes. Definitely not our focus. That's like a side hustle almost because, they'll come to us, they'll tell us what they need, and we'll be like, well, we can give you this.
Yep.
So up to you. And it works out for everybody.
Well, it certainly does. And again, to be successful, and this is, pointing out as an entrepreneur, these are the keys to your success. To be successful, you found what you were good at, and instead of trying to be everything to everybody, you're
Mhm.
like, we're going to be really good at this.
Yeah.
Even though it may be tempting to try to be everything to everybody else, that could actually, shoot you in the foot.
Mhm.
Whereas, you found what you were good at, and you're, like I said, you're also really good at finding the holes, and you just kind of stuck with that, and it's working. So when people are discussing natives, and anybody listening to that kind of thinking about natives, people will be thinking about native plants, and some people think about native plants for beauty, and some people think about native plants for like habitat choice.
Mhm.
Why does it have to be one or the other, and why can't it be both?
Oh, it could 100% be both. Absolutely can be both. I think a lot of it has to do with kind of reframing what we think gardens should look like and what they have to look like. We've been conditioned to have this like puritanical, you know, what was it, European
Mm-hmm.
weird garden situation in the New England area. We feel like we have to have this certain aesthetic to be beautiful, and I think there's this feeling that we don't want our yards to be quote unquote messy or unkempt, and native plants have had that rep as being too wild looking, and I think a lot of that comes back to some misinformation too. People are like, oh, native plants, they're easy, no maintenance. That's a load, right?
Yeah,
Because
total.
no garden is no maintenance. Like that's stupid. And
Because
so
it's a
trying
garden.
to
If it's no maintenance,
it's a
then it's actual
garden.
wildland and not
It's
your
a
garden.
field.
So
Yeah, exactly. So I just laugh when people say low maintenance. I'm like, oh, okay.
yeah,
I think that comes down to okay, then let's find exactly what your conditions are. Let's find exactly the plants that are best suited for that, and then fill the heck out of that space. People run into, native plants looking messy because they're not putting in enough plants. They're, two things are spaced out and they flop over and they bloom for short periods and then they go to seed and they think that looks messy
yeah.
or out of place. And it's so the opposite. So when I do presentations, I talk about that a lot about reframing what those gardens are supposed to look like and what beauty really is.
Yeah,
Is when you
I
start
totally agree.
seeing
When
all
you just stick
those,
asters by themselves and you have 18 inches of
yeah,
mulch around it, they're going to flop.
gonna flop.
They've adapted to lean on their friends.
Yeah.
It's really how that goes. No,
Yeah. Masses, massing
it
all over
also
the place.
nomenclature doesn't help because the majority of native plants end in weed.
Weed. Yep.
Weed.
I know.
It's just it certainly doesn't help because you don't want your garden to look weedy, and yet everything that you're putting in your garden ends in weed. So
Weed. Yeah. We've been trying to kind of change up some names. One of it's like swamp milkweed. Well, geez, nobody wants to
no,
put something called swamp milkweed in
right,
their yard, but
sounds
it's one of those
gross.
beautiful plants. And
Yep.
we're like, how about rose milkweed? That sounds nicer. So just simple naming can definitely help. But yeah, fill your garden, keep adding more, and that helps.
Absolutely one of my favorite plants to use too. So I'm glad you chose that one.
So great. It's so great. We sell a lot of it.
So from a business perspective, what are the biggest challenges in growing a native only nursery when the demand is high, supply is what it is, education
Mhm.
is what it is that we've talked about? These are basically
Yeah.
probably all of the challenges, and infrastructure and everything is still catching up. From peat free, like all of it. Like what are the challenges, and what needs to happen as far as education, as far as supply and demand, as far as the infrastructure, and like I said, and education that support natives. Like where are the biggest holes, because you're really good at finding that, and what are the biggest
Mhm.
changes that need to happen to make this native plant trend, if you want to call it that, which is just unfortunate, but
Yeah.
what needs to change to make that successful, and what are the biggest challenges you're facing?
Again, I think the reach is something that we're facing down right now. I feel like we've saturated our area, but there's still people that come in and they're like, "Oh, I had no idea you were here. I have
Mm.
never heard of you." And I'm like, "Really?" Seems crazy to me because we're busy. We're really busy. We have people like knocking down the door at the end of April. And they're like, when are you opening? I'm like, oh, not yet. Um, I think, yeah, education, 100%. The reason why I feel we were so successful is we really hit that wave. The pandemic, we were all watching webinars, watching Doug Tallamy, and that was kind of the impetus of why we started, because everyone's like, this is amazing. Where do I get these plants? And we're like, ding.
Yep.
And that's how we started. We literally started in the middle of the pandemic. So that was a huge, huge wave. And I think that just needs to continue. I love the state getting involved. Mara Healy starting with her, I always mess up the name of it, but the new commission she just started is so important. And I think as a state, Massachusetts has been really heading there. It's not perfect, but definitely heading in the right direction. We have a lot of towns that are going, more native only plantings.
Mhm.
And I think the more people hear about it and tell people, build their gardens up so that their neighbors see it, is really like, that's the key. I think, it's one thing to see plants in a botanical garden, or like in some, master gardener's exquisite landscape.
Yep.
And it's another one to just be in someone's yard and you're like, oh, this looks really pleasant and lovely. What are these plants? And it's like you're introduced to a whole new world. Or birders. My parents love bird watching. They have all these bird feeders set up. I'm like, wow, plants. These other plants, and you don't have to go out and add the bird feeders all the time.
Right. The money you save on bird seed, you can invest in.
Yes, put them in the plant, put the plants in the ground. So I think just finding those different avenues to reach more people using their passions already. We do a lot of work with Mass Audubon, which has been phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
So people are passionate about birds. So let's show them how they can have more birds in their yard. And that's going to have this whole ripple effect. So it's like each one, teach one.
Yeah.
Find out what drives people, what makes them excited, and then help them, fill out their gardens even more.
Excited about birds than bugs, I found.
That's true. That is very true. I love bugs. I'm a big bug girl.
I'm a huge bug person as well. But It's just like, I do get a lot of requests for pollinator gardens for butterflies only. And I'm
That's true.
We can put up the sign, no bees allowed, but don't think that's going to work that way. So
that one's always fun when the schools call, like the schools want to put in a butterfly garden, and we're like, okay, well, you have this, and like, oh, that will attract bees. We're like, yeah.
It is the education. The other piece with the education, and I'd love to hear your insight on this. Really comes down to, and again, it's with that paradigm shift. But okay, yes, leave the leaves and everything else, but and my angle on that is, you spent all this money on a pollinator garden. If you cut it to the nub and blow every leaf off, there go next year's pollinators, and you're basically starting again. But like, what do you see, like, as far as like, we can hit each one, like as far as municipalities are concerned? It's easier to teach homeowners, but what about the entire landscape community? Like, how are we going to, unless we just kind of keep hammering it home, leave the leaves, leave things standing, et cetera, like what is how do you approach that?
I'm kind of go back to how I'm feeling. So everyone's feeling a pinch right now economically, right? And so when it comes to like big towns, they have this palette that they've used for years, and these are the trees that they're used to working with. This is how their mowing schedule. It's very stable, and they're not willing to deviate from it.
Yeah, they know how to budget.
And so I go, well, what about if we can fill these areas with very specific plants to help, if you have a flooding issue, let's work on, bioswales and everything. So then that's going to, the amount of labor you need to pay for. to keep cleaning this area, to mow and all these things. So it's going to save money in the long run. Or like urban trees, finding urban trees. Everybody, I would hope everybody would understand the massive impact urban trees would have on neighborhoods.
Yep.
So finding trees that we can, and that's a tough order, because trees aren't meant to grow in concrete. So it's challenging, but I think talking to people's pocketbooks really helps.
Yep.
When you're like, yeah, is it an outlay at the beginning? Absolutely. Everything is. But if you look down the road and you look at the labor that could be saved while also adding ecological benefits, it's like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, certain towns and especially certain regions, are changing, and you kind of mentioned it before, kind of are changing the bylaws, et cetera, kind of requesting native plants, doubling down on wetland buffer zones and, everything else, just not letting things slide. My big one that I would love to see is treating street trees differently, so that they can live a little longer than 3 to 5 years, maybe stop making the coffins. I feel like that's a huge, missed opportunity, with the, people, towns tear up their sidewalks and then repeat the same mistake, even when it's mentioned, hey, these trees need more, more soil volume, et cetera. It's certainly hard, but like you said, people go with what they know. They go with what works. They go with what's budgeted. I find the same thing that happens in stormwater. People are unwilling to kind of try something new. Although it's, as I say to people, like, it's not new. This is actually older than what you're doing. It's so far not new, but no, it's just such a challenge. And I find, oftentimes, like I said, people are getting into natives, but they're still have their same land care practices. I use like Trillium and things like that as examples. Like, this is a plant that is used to growing in 6 inches of leaf duff. If you blow every single leaf off your property, don't then ask me why your $40 Trillium isn't growing. It's a total.
I mean, I
totally
go back in my presentations. I always say it perplexes. I'm a pretty cheap person. I don't like spending money if I don't have to. And I am I'm frugal. I'm not cheap. I always say, explain to me why you spend all this time and you break your back raking and blowing your leaves in the fall, and then go to Home Depot in the spring and you buy topsoil and mulch. When you why would you do that? You already have it right there. Just leave it alone and it's fine. And I get it. It's, it goes back to that, we need neat, clean, whatever. I have neighbors on either side of me that are very fastidious, beautiful yards and, not a leaf to be found. And I'm lucky I have maple trees, so I don't really worry about it too much. Touch them. And they're very kind about it. Because I'm like, that's how it's going to be. But then I also have these, beautiful plants that come up and they're always complimenting. It's just, you see it happening in a yard and you're like, it draws the eye. And I, hit them in the pocketbook, be like, why would you spend, a couple $100 each spring when you don't have to? You can buy more flowers, which is great.
Mine was really out of necessity. I knew it was the right thing to do, but by October, November, I am so tired of really being in the landscape that I'm just like, you get to stay. But I also had a very similar neighbor situation, where was doing my practice on my property, kind of leading by example, and have a neighbor, who'd look over the fence and kind of, wasn't, but then wondered why I had all the hummingbirds when they had all the hummingbird feeders, wondered why everything was hanging out in my yard. So we had the conversation. They started adopting some of those practices. And then the neighbor on the other side was just like, I absolutely love looking out my window and watching all the birds in your yard. I live in, tight neighborhood, so they're like, I love watching all the wildlife in your backyard. I'm like, you can do it too. So then it slowly
Yes.
changes. And like you said before, not from shaming. Not
Right.
saying, not telling anybody you're doing it wrong. You're not going to tell your neighbors they're doing it wrong. However, if they want to see all the cardinals and bluebirds and everything in their yard, just like you have, they don't see the fence line. They don't know the property line. They're more than happy to go over there as long as it all matches up. So yeah, I totally
100%.
agree with you there. 100%.
Yeah, and a lot of it does come down to the very last thing I want to do after working with plants all day is come home and garden. So it's a little bit like cobbler's children has no shoes. My yard is pretty rough.
Yeah. It's survival of the illest. It's just like,
so
you know what?
much.
Here you are. I'm gonna put you right here, right plant, right place, right conditions.
Yeah, you're good.
And go.
I do have
because
a
I'm not
lot
gonna
of
touch you.
plants I have a lot of plants in containers that I'm like, I swear someday you're gonna see the ground.
Yes.
Just
trust me, I'm going to introduce you to your community soon enough. Not today. Mommy's tired, but
yeah.
It
My
will
husband's always
happen
like,
for sure.
what are we doing with these plants? I'm like, eventually they're going to go in the ground.
Exactly. Eventually they'll get there. I know where I want them. I
have a plan.
Yeah.
I have a plan.
I have wonderful plan. And an insatiable appetite for buying cool things and bringing them home. However, they're not going to make it in the yard. So let me just ask you really just a couple final questions. But looking ahead, what would success look like for Blue Stem and for the native plant movement in New England over the next 5 years?
Ooh, that's a good one. We really want to reach more people. So I think we want to be able to get native plants in as many yards as possible. I think we'd love to expand our footprint or, we lease our property. So buying our own property would be phenomenal. And having we do have some great employees, but being able to be successful enough to have a fantastic team, long-term team would be awesome, because I think the more that we're able to have employees that can work the nursery and also, outside the nursery at sales and doing consultations and maybe installations in the future, finding those holes again. I think that's really what we're looking to do.
Awesome.
Yeah. I know. It's a big order. It's a little stressful to think about.
I say manifest the hell out of it.
Honestly,
just keep believing it's going to happen. And it will certainly happen. So before we totally wrap things up, I'm wondering, are there any, aside from your website, which is tight as far as information is concerned, are there any books or other publications, any place that you would send a native plant enthusiast, again, aside from your website, because I love being on there and just seeing everything you're up to and all the info you have on there, and you do great, with your education and outreach, which is your portion of the business as far as I know. But where would you lead people? Like as they're getting excited, as they're getting ready to come to the nursery, like where would you lead people to kind of prep themselves for a season of native plants and or just to learn more?
Well, this is where I feel like the native plant industry as a whole is so different from like the typical garden center or horticulture industry, because while we're in competition a little bit, we have bigger goals. So we work together so well. And so we have a phenomenal network in this immediate region. And I think we're just so lucky. So there's Native Plant Trust, which yeah, you can't go wrong. Like Go Botany is an absolutely phenomenal tool that we use on the daily. The Native Plant Finder.
Yep.
Grow Native Mass is an amazing. It's grownativemass.org. Absolutely amazing resource, and they've put together a bunch of us. We have like a list serve of all of our little nurseries, and includes backyard growers and slightly larger nurseries, and we work together to find plants, swap seeds. We do hit farmers markets. So it's a community through and through,
Yep.
and it doesn't feel like. I mean, I don't know what it's like to work at a big garden center, but I can't really imagine being like, oh, call up Kennedy's and see,
Yep.
What they're selling this for. I don't really think that's how it works.
Yep.
But we don't have a problem doing that. If somebody's looking for something, I'm like, oh, I'll call, Katie up in Ipswich, and we'll find that plant for you, or I'll send you up to Walter in North Andover. So
Yep.
it's a beautiful thing.
It is.
And
it's a wonderful
that means
community.
we don't have to grow everything. Yeah, we don't have to grow it all. We can kind of split it up, and everybody can have a piece. It's really great.
And I think people appreciate that, because you're absolutely right. Within the native plant community and with native plant nurseries, like, everybody's really just like trying to make whoever the client is, successful. And that, that's the piece. So like helping people, even if it's elsewhere, to find plants, etc. Like, you're making that person successful, and you're setting them on a good path, on their native journey, which is just, which is awesome, because it's not not really a cutthroat thing.
Business wise, probably not a great decision, but that's not why we're in this. Do we want to make money and have, healthy financial families? Of course.
Yes.
The margins in the horticulture world are abysmal, but there's a bigger plan for all of this. And we really just it's idealistic, I guess, but it's working for us and it's working for others. So that's how we everything.
That's just awesome. So why don't you tell everybody where they can find you? And first of all, I will let you know, if you email Bluestem, you will get an auto response. They will get back to you. If you call, you have to leave a message.
Voicemail.
These are very busy women doing amazing work. So please give them a little bit of patience, but tell them where to find you. Tell them what they should be checking out, and when are you opening?
And it is an absolutely brutal time of year. So
totally.
And keep in mind, we do have children too. So we are busy creatures. Yes. So we are in Norwell, right off of Route 53, and not terribly visible from the road. It's a little bitty sign. You have to kind of look for it. So Village Gardens, it's a big sign with lots of little shops. It's lovely. You should totally come and see. Lots of women-owned little businesses in there. And we are all the way in the back. So you see the Village Garden sign and you take a little trip towards the back, you'll see the nursery and the greenhouse and everything. And it's wonderful. But right off of Route 53 in Norwell.
All right.
And you can find us. Our website is bluestemnatives.com with an S at the end.
Yes.
And, yep. And all of our contact information is right down the bottom. But yeah, it is going to take us a little bit to get back to you.
That's okay. It's okay, because
is what it is.
in spite of it all, you've created a hell of a demand. People are hungry for what it is, you are all doing there. You got a great product, you got a great mission, and it's definitely worth the wait. I'm just wanted to preface that, because people get excited and people want answers now, right? Meow, and you can't always get it, and that's because this is a small, owner operated business, and they're not going to. If enough people come,
we don't have
maybe they'll have somebody, a phone center or something going, but we got to get those people there first. But you guys are doing amazing work. I am just so appreciative of everything you're doing. And thank you so much for showing up today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me and being patient with nailing me down.
It is all good. It was worth the wait, and I'm glad we made it happen. Thank you so much for joining us on Peace, Love, and Pollinators. We will see you next time.